Bombay friends? It's Charles here, and I am going to break a well-established rule on my channel. I have always said that I will not review something that's killing the children because it is such a popular book. I would argue possibly the most popular independent comic book that's being printed right now, and for good reason. And I don't want to walk in the footprints of other reviewers, but I have a unique opportunity here. I got into the series maybe in the late teens, early 20s of the run, and now we're in the 40s. And so there's a lot of established lore and a lot of stuff I missed. And so I was very thankful when Boom Studios did a reissue of Something is Killing the Children #1. And so I figured you may be like me, new to the lore, new to the book, and maybe intimidated a little bit to jump in. So I'm going to take a look at #1 with fresh eyes. I've read it before, I've read it again, and guess what? I'm going to read it again because the writing is that good, the art is that good, and I would say right off the bat, looking back at #1, this is a book that had itself figured out from day one. And they hint at things and they show things that they don't necessarily point out that as the series goes forth, you're like, yep, that makes sense. Looking back on #1 from, like I said, I think around issue number 42, 43, really added a lot more context to this. And so we start off not with Erica, our main protagonist, um, but with this group of teenagers, and they're at this young man James's house for a sleepover, and they're playing truth and dare and telling ghost stories and doing those things that you would do at a sleepover. And you can tell right off from the writing and from even the way that he is depicted that James would be the proverbial runt of the litter. He is the low guy on the totem pole. He is the out of place guy trying to fit in. And they ask him, they playing truth and dare. They want him to tell the truth. So they ask him, what is the scariest thing that you've seen? Because we find out through the writing, not through any exposition, that he is known for his nightmares and for telling these stories. And so he tells him about a monster that he's seen in the ravine when he was alone in the house through his window. And, the kids, you can tell right here, this is him telling the story. They go in depth with the story, with the writing, with the interactions, with the emotion. Uh, this is a book with a lot of panels and a lot of dialogue, but it never seems overwhelming or forced or congested. It's all meaningful and it all adds to the story. And eventually they, get frustrated and they, why are you making this stuff up? And he's like, okay, yeah, it's just a story. And he's trying to calm everybody down. And then you turn the page and you see that we have jumped from that night to him being in a police interrogation room. And if you look at the art here, you see that James is clearly emotional and rattled. Even the detective is emotionally rattled in the way that they're drawn, and the emotion that comes off of the page is brilliant. I mean, you really feel for these people, and this art style. It's I am not an art aficionado or somebody who knows a lot about art, but I would describe it as kind of a pencil sketch style, which invokes feelings of sparseness and desolation and unease within me, at least, as the reader, as the consumer of this. And so we find out that he's being questioned about something. And then, like, a TV show or a movie, you turn the page and you have the full two-page panel with the title, Something is Killing the Children. And so I like that. We start off with one thing and certain expectations, and then it just cuts off abruptly to the interrogation scene, and then right to the opening credits. And so even before they get into the book proper, they have laid down a foundation of what's happened without, like I said, without the forced um, front-loaded narrative that you would usually get. And we go from that scene to meeting our protagonist, Erica Slaughter, and she is coming out of the woods with a machete covered in blood. Uh, Back to a young girl with a bandage over her eye who has definitely been through some stuff. And she comes in, and this whole page is really no dialogue. It's just her coming out of the woods, bloodied, bruised, and exhausted. And she just, downs a drink of water and just falls to the ground. And I like the fact they spent 2 pages on just this scene, telling you what has happened since, and then we get to another page that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 20 something panels right here, and a lot of dialogue. And in the first panel, the young girl says, "Is it over?" Erica says, "Yeah." And they're kind of cold, and they're both, even more than the physical exhaustion, the emotional exhaustion. And we get a call. Erica gets a call from a number that says St. George, and that is the order that she belongs to. And she goes right from that to having to travel to Wisconsin to track down another monster. And I really like the fact that they don't spoon feed you anything. They give you context clues, they show and they don't tell. Yet it's very clear what is happening here. And so we go from her, getting the call about Wisconsin, and we cut back to James going to school, and you see the memorial. And we find out through this that, James is one of the more bullied kids in the school. And the fact that all of these kids died at his slumber party further ostracizes him and attracts more bullies and accusations about his sexuality and about, maybe he's the killer. And a lot of very real emotion coming from a real place that is misplaced on this kid who is, just a victim. And we find out that those kids aren't the first to die in that town, and that they were just some of 19 that have been dying, from something. They presume it's a bear attack, but a lot of town isn't buying it. And I like this scene here where he's sent to the principal's office because he literally, as these accusations are, being thrown at him, he says, "Shut up." And I like right here where he says "shut up" initially. You notice in the speech bubble, the word "shut up" is very faint, like he's whispering it under his breath because he doesn't know, because he's timid. And in the next panel, the kid says, "What did you say to me?" And in a huge, sharply drawn, bold typeface bubble, he says, "I said, shut the fuck up." And so it really illustrates him raising his voice and standing up for himself. And then we cut to the vice principal's office, who you think may be coming down on him, but he really sympathizes with him and has an emotional breakdown and breaks down into tears himself. And it's rare that I read a comic book and I feel the emotion that makes me emotional, but these panels right here between him and the principal, it really shows the principal, I think, is in a way a representative of the town and the heartache that they're feeling from these series of unsolved crimes. Erica gets off the bus, introduces herself to James at the motel. And then one thing I really like here too is, after the dialogue of her introducing herself and trying to find out what he really did see. And I'm not going to give you a blow by blow for that. Let's just say that it's gruesome and beautifully drawn and bloody, and we'll leave it at that. But yeah, one touch here that I really, really like. If I can find that panel. and it's something I didn't pick up on when I before I knew the lore of this. But it's when she is introducing herself, and he's asking about, is she gonna help fix what's going on in the town right here. Um, so in the previous panels, I read what you said to the cops, James. I know all about that, but I don't want you to. But I don't want to know what you told them. I want to know what you saw. And then she reveals the implant in her temple. And if you're familiar with the lore of something that's killing children, you know that only the children can actually see the monster. And this implants allow the adults who are tasked with hunting them down to see them. And so I thought that was a real clever way of introducing that lore. Something that you're not going to understand from issue number one, but it's something that an old reader can go back to and be like, oh, that's where that intro was introduced. And it pays off paying attention to the details. And so, as always, I really suggest that you guys are in the comic books, if you're into mysteries, and if you're just a fan of great writing, check out Something Is Killing the Children. I believe, like I said, I believe we're heading into 42 or 43 right now. You can get a little comic book store, and you may be able to find a reprint at a reasonable price. You're not going to find a lot of the early issues at a great price because it's just that popular. But if you can get it, you will not be disappointed. And as always, I suggest if you're in Wyoming, check out my friends at Spellbound Apothecary and Entertainment. They can be found at spellboundcasper.com. They ship for free in state when you order over $35 worth of comic books. I'll see you next time. Until then, keep reading them books. I'm out.